For this video, we're going over the solving rational equations exit slip. So the first problem on the exit slip was this one, 9 over 2x minus 3 equals 5 over x plus 5. So now when I just have a fraction equal to a fraction, I can cross multiply. So I'm going to just do 9 times x plus 5 and 5 times 2x plus 3. Don't forget to distribute. So I basically have 9 times x plus 5, and that's going to be equal to 5 times 2x minus 3. Now when I distribute, I get 9x plus 45 equals 10x minus 15. Now I can just use my normal algebra solving skills. So 45 equals x minus 15, add 15, and 60 would equal x. So the answer would be B. This next problem was similar. We have a fraction equal to a fraction, so I'm going to cross multiply again. 5 times x plus 1 and negative 1 times x plus 2. So I'm going to have 5 times x plus 1 equals negative 1 times x plus 2. So I'm going to have 5x plus 5 equals negative 1x minus 2. And then I'm going to use my algebra skills and I'm going to solve. And it looks like we're going to get a fraction, but that's okay. So my answer is going to be negative 7/6, which would have been option D. For this problem, we no longer have a fraction equal to a fraction. I need to get a common denominator. So the first thing I'm going to do is factor this first fraction. So a squared minus 36 will factor into x plus 6, x minus 6. Which is good because my other denominators are a minus 6 and a plus 6. So this first fraction, I'm going to multiply by the second fraction, a plus 6 over a plus 6, because that will give me a common denominator of a minus 6 and a plus 6. The last fraction, I'm going to multiply by a minus 6 over a minus 6. That way I get a common denominator all the way across. So my first fraction is going to stay the same, except for the fact that I've factored the denominator. My second fraction I need to now distribute, so I'm going to have 2a plus 12 over a minus 6a plus 6 equals, distribute the 1, a minus 6 over a plus 6a minus 6. Once we have a common denominator all the way across, I no longer need to worry about the denominator. So I'm just going to set up an equation using just the numerator. So I'm going to have a plus 2a plus 12 equals a minus 6. And now I can solve this using my normal algebra. So a plus 2a is 3a. (2a plus 12 equals negative 6. 2a equals negative 18. A is going to equal negative 9, which would be option A. In this problem, we're going to need to get a common denominator. So the first thing I'm going to do is factor this first fraction. So x squared minus 9 factors into x plus 3, x minus 3. Now, I can see in the second fraction I have x minus 3, so I'm going to multiply by x plus 3 and x plus 3. Now, I could also do that with the 1, but I'm actually going to save the 1 and make it a 1 over 1. Once I get a common denominator on the left side, I'm just going to cross multiply. So my first fraction is going to stay the same. Just factor the denominator. My second fraction, I'm going to distribute the 1. So 1 times x is x. 1 times 3 is 3. Over the common denominator. And then it's going to equal 1 over 1. Now remember, when we're subtracting, it's super important to make sure we subtract both numbers. So this is going to become a negative x and a negative 3. So now that I go to combine like terms, I'm going to have negative x plus 3 over x plus 3, x minus 3 is going to equal 1 over 1. Okay, so now I can cross multiply. So 1 times negative x plus 3 is negative x plus 3. And then I know that if I multiply these together, I get x squared minus 9. So this is going to be a quadratic equation that I'm now going to have to solve. So now I want to move everything to one side to make it equal to 0. Because that's what I need when I have a quadratic equation. So I'm going to have 0 equals x squared plus x minus 12. Now to solve this, I'm going to have to factor. So I need to think about what multiplies to negative 12 and adds to 1. And that's going to be a positive 4 and a negative 3. Now to solve, I'm going to set each of these equal to 0. I'm going to get x is negative 4 and x is positive 3. Now, before I can say these are both my solutions, I need to double check that neither of these are excluded values. So remember, excluded values are anything that makes my denominator 0. So my excluded values in this case would have been 3 and negative 3. And so 3 cannot be a solution to this problem because it's one of my excluded values. So the only solution is negative 4, which is option A. For this solving problem, we need to get a common denominator. So the first thing I'm going to do is factor this first polynomial. And it's going to factor into x minus 3, x plus 2. Which I can see that I have each of those parts in the other part of my solving equation. So x plus 2 and x plus 2 match, but I need an x plus 2 for this middle fraction. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 2. This one has an x minus 3, and this one has an x minus 3, but the first one doesn't, so I'm going to multiply that one by x minus 3. So now that I have the common denominator all the way across, I can multiply out. So I'm going to do 2 times x and 2 times negative 3, so I'll get 2x minus 6 over x minus 3, x plus 2. Minus, distribute the 7, so I'll get 7x plus 14 over x minus 3, x plus 2 equals, then this last fraction is not going to change, other than I'm going to write the denominator as the factored form. All right, now that I have all the same denominator, I can just work on the numerator. But remember, this is subtraction, so I'm going to change this to plus, minus, minus. So I'm going to have 2x minus 6 minus 7x minus 14 equals 5. So let's combine some like terms. So negative 5x minus 20 equals 5. And then finish solving. So x would equal negative 5, which is option A. For this next problem, we're going to work on getting a common denominator again. First, I'm going to start by factoring this part, and I'm going to factor it by GCF. The GCF is an x, so x squared minus 2x will factor into x times x minus 2. So again, I'm going to identify what parts of the common denominator each fraction has and what part they need. So this first fraction has x minus 2, same as the common denominator, but it needs the x. It needs this x. So I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by x. And then this middle guy has the x, but doesn't have the x minus 2. So I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by x minus 2. So that'll leave me with 3x over x times x minus 2 plus 7x minus 14, because I'm going to distribute, over x times x minus 2 equals negative 14 over x times x minus 2. Now that I have the common denominator, I can just use the numerator to set up an equation. And I'm going to have 10x equals 0, so x is going to equal 0. Now, anytime we get a solution, though, we have to think about what the excluded values are. So my excluded values. So my excluded values for this one are x cannot be 0 or 2, because those would be the two things that would make my denominator 0. Since my solution was 0, that means this is actually not a solution. So if there is no solution, that means there's no solution. So this problem actually has no solution. And this last problem is a little bit different because now my denominators really are not the same. I have x minus 2 and x plus 2, and then I have 1 over 1. So to get a common denominator, my common denominator is going to have to be x plus 2, x minus 2. So I'm going to multiply this first one by x minus 2 on the top and the bottom. Multiply this first one by x plus 2 on the top and the bottom. And this middle guy, I'm going to multiply by x plus 2, x minus 2 on the top and the bottom. Now remember, x plus 2, x minus 2 is just x squared minus 4 when you multiply this out. So I'm going to write it all out here, and then I'll multiply it out. All right, so now that's all written out. Now I'm going to multiply it out. So now that I have a common denominator, I don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to focus on just the numerator. So distribute the 18. So I'm going to 18x plus 36 equals x squared minus 4 plus 20x minus 40. So since I have the x squared, this is going to be a quadratic equation. So I want to combine like terms and move everything to one side. So first I'm going to minus the 18x to the 20x. And I'm going to combine this negative 4 and this negative 40. So I'm going to go up here. 36 equals x squared plus 2x minus 44 minus the 36. And I'm going to get 0 equals x squared plus 2x minus 80. So now I need to think about what multiplies to negative 80 and adds to positive 2. Well, that's going to be a positive 10 and a negative 8. So if I set those each equal to 0, my two solutions are going to be negative 10 and positive 8. So now make sure that neither of those are excluded values. Well, my excluded values would have been 2 and negative 2, because those would have been the two things that would have made my denominator 0. Since neither of those solutions are 2 or negative 2, that means my answer is answer choice B.